in Bataan. The interpreter spoke with the Chief of Staff for a few moments and received instructions, turned back to General King and said, "You must go and get General Wainwright." General King explained that he did not represent General Wainwright, that he represented only himself, and that he had no means of getting in touch with General Wainwright. The aide turned back to the senior staff officer, and they conferred again, whereupon the aide addressed himself to General King and said, "For what purpose have you come?" General King said that he had come to secure terms for the force in Bataan. The aide turned back to the senior officer, and they talked for a few moments again, and then turning back to General King, he repeated the question, phrasing it differently. I don't remember how he said it, but it led General King to speak concerning his mission. And General King said that he wished to secure terms for the troops on Bataan, and that he would like to ask for certain conditions. First, that he be permitted to return to our headquarters in order to send couriers forward to apprise forward elements of the fact of our collapse. Second, that he requested an armistice of 12 hours in order to accomplish that purpose. Third, that the Japanese forces remain in their present positions during that armistice in order to obviate further loss of life. And last, he pointed out that he had preserved sufficient truck and motor car transportation in Bataan to evacuate the prisoners to any point on Luzon that the Japanese staff might indicate, accompanied by proper guards. This was then repeated to the senior staff officer. At that time, I understood very little Japanese. I understood no Japanese, and so I don't know what he said. However, he spoke shortly, and the aide turned back to General King and said, "Surrender must be unconditional." So the general said that if he were to agree to an unconditional surrender, would the Japanese consider the following provisions. And changing his phraseology in the hope that the difficulties of interpretation might help our case, he repeated that he would like to have permission to notify forward elements that it would save a good deal of life on both sides if during this period the Japanese forces were to remain in their present positions, and that the movement of prisoners would be facilitated by the use of our trucks and motor car transportation. Of course, the general knew that operations would begin upon Corregidor immediately, and Corregidor's guns were able to bear on parts of Bataan. We had used those guns on Japanese landings on Longoskawayan and Quinaon points. So the aide repeated this again to the senior staff officer, who repeated again, surrender must be unconditional. General King then asked if our troops would be well treated. And after a conference again with the senior officer by the aide turned to General King and said, "We are not barbarians." And I'll never forget the way he said that. That was all that General King was able to secure in the way of a promise of treatment. A promise of treatment was that we are not barbarians.